wonderful, wonderful members of our education team. And to the principals and teachers who helped put these together, our thanks as well. It's particularly special, I think, when these words come from colleagues and principals who've worked with these individuals every day. So we have, actually there are four people who are not with us this evening. So let me start through those. One of those people who's not here is Janice Gaudet, who is a teacher in the Therapeutic Learning Center at the Devotion School. And this was written by her colleagues. Congratulations to Janice Gaudet and her 30-year commitment to the public schools of Brookline. In our eyes, Janice has been a pioneer to our district, teaching students in the Therapeutic Learning Center. She is an educator who represents the true meaning of collective responsibility for students, giving extra TLC to any student who needs it. Janice is an educator, a mentor, a friend, and a warrior for students and families of Brookline. We could spend a lot of time citing the ways Janice goes above and beyond, coming in every day in the 6 o'clock hour, endless supplies of snacks, providing toys to play with while waiting for the bus, giving them shovels in the winter is a favorite. But this is just a glimpse. Her legacy as an educator reaches far beyond the walls of Devotion School. Perhaps the best way to honor Janice is with a story about a student Janice worked with. The story starts with a student who all the staff acknowledged as having made outstanding progress. Janice spoke to her colleagues in regard to this student and said, "I wish I knew what we did so we could bottle it." When the student was asked what made a difference for him and helped him achieve at such a high level, the student said, "I am not angry anymore." When asked why, the student responded with one simple word, "Janice." We thank Janice for her amazing dedication and service to the students and families of Brookline for these 30 years. Janice Gaudet. Bob Condell, who also teaches at the Devotion School, also not able to be with us this evening. Congratulations to Bob Condell and his 30 years of service to the students and families of Brookline. Bob is the consummate gentleman, a true class act. Bob is always the person who opens the door for others and offers an after you to those he meets at the door. He has a wonderful rapport with his students. His students appreciate his sense of humor and quick wit. He builds and sustains positive relationships with families and is a highly respected member of the Devotion faculty. An expert in the field of math and science, Bob is a collegial teammate who brings wisdom and experience to his 6th grade team. He holds high standards for optimal student achievement and is well respected by his students. Bob has a gift of bringing science to life for his students and fosters an understanding of the content that ignites a lifelong passion for the scientific world. As a student in Bob's classroom, you can guarantee the opportunity to explore concepts through hands-on experiments that amaze and delight the most curious learners. We thank Bob for his dedication and service to the students and families of Brookline these last 30 years. Bob Condell. And D'Angelo, also from the Devotion School. Congratulations to D'Angelo and his 30-year commitment to the public schools of Brookline. As custodial staff has come and gone from the Devotion School over the years, Dan has been a constant. He knows the ins and outs of the facility, no small feat, has strong relationships with the staff and families of Devotion, and a deep, deep commitment to the care of the building. He is a kind, mild-mannered gentleman. He is quick with a smile and offers a helping hand to all in need. In his role as night custodian, Dan is responsible for managing the setup, breakdown, and general needs of out-of-school programming and evening events. This could be a stressful undertaking for many, but Dan approaches each group with ease and diplomacy when dilemmas arise. Dan has made an extra effort to build relationships with his colleagues that are often leaving as he is arriving. He makes an effort to stop in classrooms to say hello and truly cares how others are doing. He is respected for his quality of work and commitment to the Devotion community. We thank Dan for his dedication and service to the students and families of Brookline these last 30 years. D'Angelo. I'm going to save the other person who's not with us for last and start through those who we're lucky enough to have with us here this evening. Scott Bouchard. This was written by his principal, Deb Holman. Scott Bouchard is a gem of the Brookline High School community. He is an instructional leader. He has guided many teachers through their first year of teaching at BHS. His clarity, respected listening, and expertise have contributed to their success. Mr. Bouchard promotes high standards and expectations for, and he instills confidence and perseverance in students. He encourages them to assume personal responsibility for achieving the goals of the curriculum. This also translates in his daily conversations with teachers, where he advocates for our most disenfranchised students in ways that maintain the integrity of the course requirements and respects teachers' individual styles. He helps articulate and enforce ways to hold the line by setting clear limits and consequences. Scott excels in his administrative roles as Associate Dean, Interim Dean, and now BHS Permanent Dean. He is constantly walking around the building, finding students or teachers to share information, clarify concerns, design solutions, and follow up on progress. He is a trusted consultant to the headmaster and other administrators, and in this era of change and growth for Brookline High School, he is our sage advisor. Scott Bouchard. Thanks, Scott. Congratulations. Barbara Donnelly, written by her principal, Kristen Herbert. Sometimes in life you get lucky. Lincoln School is lucky to have had Barbara Donnelly quietly educating students to the highest level with her gentle manner and warm smile for the last 30 years. The most noteworthy part of Barbara Donnelly's pedagogy is her tone. She exudes warmth. This says excludes. I think I meant exudes. Exudes warmth that just envelops her young students. The tone in her classroom is joyful. Barbara is often smiling, and there are many, many inside jokes. When one talks to parents of older students, they say, Mrs. Donnelly's class, that was when my child learned to love school. Barbara Donnelly sets her sights no lower than high achievement for all students. Visits to her classroom always find children actively engaged in important learning. She cares deeply and works tirelessly for an engaging, rich curriculum for all learners. She has just this year worked as a leader to implement a new literacy program for her students. She is the kindergarten math coordinator across the district for the Think Math curriculum. Her lessons are beautifully differentiated so that each child gets the content at a stretch level for them. It is not just for her own students that Barbara works so hard. Several times in the past couple of years, there has been an older student who needed a safe place to land because they were a bit fragile emotionally. Barbara has warmly invited these students into her classroom. The older students read to younger ones, have led them in games, joined in their meetings, helped them with math and writing, and gave or received hugs. At times, going to help out in kindergarten was the high point in an older student's day. It was what they looked forward to. It was what gave them their confidence back and allowed them to rejoin their peers with a sense of accomplishment. Barbara has taken care of the Lincoln community for years. She has led our Sunshine Committee and in that role supported colleagues through blessings, losses, and illnesses. Recently, she has thrown Valentine's parties, retirement parties, and Friday breakfasts. Sometimes in life you get lucky. The students of Lincoln School have been lucky to have Barbara as their teacher. She makes learning engaging, challenging, and enjoyable. The faculty of Lincoln School have been that lucky. She makes collaboration feel helpful, supportive, and caring. We've gotten lucky. We've been lucky for this past 30 years. Barbara Donnelly. Elaine Duger. Maya Angelou, written by Mary Brown, who's here. Maya Angelou once said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. As we think about Caverly Award winner Elaine Duger and her commitment to Baker School in Brookline, we must recognize how she has made this community feel over the past 30 years. Ms. Duger's students feel joy being in her class. They love learning and are fully engaged in the creative and challenging experiences she crafts for them. Sometimes it can be difficult to determine who is feeling more joy in the classroom, the students or the teachers, or the teacher, as the energy in the room is truly palpable. Ms. Duger's students feel her warmth, but also know she has high expectations. Students struggling with their learning know that Ms. Duger will be right there with them to ensure they are successful. As for students having difficulty with friends and peers, she will help facilitate the problem solving needed so that students can move their conflict forward in a positive direction. Her Boston College student teachers feel supported and challenged. She provides her mentees with the experiences and knowledge base needed to be effective, and there is no question that these future teachers thrive under her tutelage. In fact, Ms. Duger currently works with 3 of her former student teachers, and together they are a powerful team of professionals. Ms. Duger's school community feels honored and inspired working with a professional who offers her guidance and wisdom in a no-nonsense, respectful way. She models the art of being a powerful advocate for all students. For years, Ms. Duger has written curriculum and worked on a variety of curriculum committees. She pushes her own learning through her participation in courses ranging from Socratic inquiry to the art of Winslow Homer. Her colleagues and her administrators feel she is an invaluable resource at our school as well as at the district level, and we are looking forward to her next teaching milestone of 40 years. Elaine Duger. Andrea Doan, written by Dave O'Hare from Devotion School. Congratulations to Andrea Doan and her 30-year commitment to the public schools of Brookline. As a first grade teacher, Andrea is a reliable colleague and a willing collaborator. As a mentor to her grade level teammates, support staff, and interns, she consistently works alongside others in an effort to support their growth as educators. Over the years, she has served as a guide to many young interns who have gone on to become highly qualified educators. Fostering a strong homeschool partnership has always been a priority for Andrea. She begins each school year with an invitation to families to join her for a listening conference. During this meeting with parents, she takes time to actively listen to families regarding their hopes and dreams for their child's first grade experiences, as well as to hear from parents about their concerns or questions. Starting the year with families in this way demonstrates an interest and investment in every child. Andrea builds positive community dynamics using core principles from Responsive Classroom. Over the years, parents have described her classroom as a calm and tranquil environment. I'm coming there tomorrow. And one parent included in an end-of-the-year thank you note, "We marvel at the feeling of calm, security, and warmth we sense every time we enter your classroom." Many thanks to Andrea for her extraordinary 30 years of service to the students and families of Brookline. Andrea Doan. Nancy Frayne, written by Miss Lacey. Congratulations to Nancy Frayne and her 30 years of service to the students and families of Brookline. Nancy has served as a mentor to her colleagues, support staff, and countless interns over the years. She is incredibly skilled in her delivery of literacy instruction and puts great effort into training student teachers each year. Nancy values strong homeschool partnerships, making it a priority to build relationships with her students and their families. Parents in her class appreciate her proactive approach to homeschool communication and trust that she will always provide them with important information in a timely manner. Even when a difficult conversation must be had, Nancy does not avoid sharing this news with parents, and she does it in a way that allows families to feel cared for and supported. Nancy's colleagues look to her as a model for high-quality instruction. She is always willing to work with other teachers to help them improve practice and to identify how to improve her own. She is a mentor, an active contributor, and a friend to the entire Devotion community. She is a champion of education, challenging students to do their best and always meeting any new challenge with grace and determination. Many thanks to Nancy for her service to students and families during her 30 years with the public schools of Brookline. Nancy Frayne. Let me get my notes straight here. Pat Harrington, written by Deb Holman. In her classes, Pat Harrington never plays it safe. If the goal on the board is to teach students Spanish expressions, to describe to people what actually happens. What actually happens is a heated debate where kids question the nature of gender identity and sexual orientation. The unit on food vocabulary is an opportunity to uncover the hypocrisy of eating meat while opposing the killing of animals. Teens love Pat because she nourishes their desire to ask big and difficult questions. She respects them enough to make them uncomfortable, and she comes to class fully expecting them to jump into the melee. For Pat, it is personal. For so many students, for so many colleagues, Pat is that adult that you feel safe going to no matter what. Pat Harrington is an artist. Her media is teaching. Her masterpieces are walking around our world in the shape of good people, young and old, that she has inspired. She reminds all of us to bring our authentic selves to work. She reminds all of us that as educators, our mission goes beyond the academic concepts that we teach. It is a sacred mission. It is a social mission. It is a political mission. For the past 30 years, Pat taught students how to communicate in Spanish. For the past 30 years, what Pat really taught all of us is that what we learn is meaningless unless it is used to create a just and compassionate world. Pat Harrington. Terry Jewell, provided by Rick Rogers, her principal. Terry Jewell currently serves as a literacy specialist at Lawrence and Baker schools. She's also the parent of 2 children in the public schools of Brookline. Her daughter Tess graduated from Brookline High School this year. Terry began her career as a 3rd grade teacher at Baker, a position she held for 13 years. She then became a literacy specialist at Baker and also served for 13 years. During 09-10, Terry served as the coordinator for English Language Arts before returning to the literacy specialist role at Lawrence. Retired Baker principal Tom Cavanaugh recalls that Terry was his first hire when he became principal, his first important decision. He had seen Terry as a student teacher at Devotion and was impressed with her, noting that she was wise beyond her years. Tom credits Terry for playing a leadership role in building strong teams at Baker, beginning with her own 3rd grade team. He also noted her interest in mentoring other teachers, serving as the school's mentor facilitator. Rick says he sees the same elements in her work at Lawrence. Terry continues to support a strong team culture through her meetings with grade-level teams and the other literacy specialists. She continues to serve as a mentor facilitator at Lawrence. She remains open to continuous learning and has embraced recent efforts to implement the BAS and the LLI intervention program. When asked what she is proudest of, Terry is very clear. I am proudest of the number of students I have helped learn to read over the years. On behalf of all those students, as well as the many colleagues she has supported, we thank her for her 30 years of service to the public schools of Brookline. Terry Jewell. Karen Miller, also written by Rick Rogers. Karen Miller is currently the school nurse at Lawrence School. She is also a former Brookline parent, having had 2 children graduate from Driscoll and 2 others graduate from Devotion. She served as PTO president at Driscoll. I didn't know that, Karen. Karen began as a school nurse in Brookline in 1981 at Lawrence, Lincoln, and Pierce. She began permanently in Brookline in 1984. In those days, Karen went between 2 schools, with Lawrence always the constant. She finally became full-time at Lawrence around the time the school moved to Old Lincoln during the renovation. Karen is empathetic and supportive, listening to children and comforting them when they are upset or anxious while attending to various bumps, bruises, and stomach aches. She delights in the unusual things that children say or do, and her laughter often spills out from her office into the lobby. I've heard that laughter. Karen has dealt with a variety of health issues over the years, including food allergies and a recent increase in diabetes. Karen sees the big picture in schools and relishes her role as unofficial Lawrence historian. She embraces and celebrates the diversity in our community. She serves on the school's child study team. She is a member of the school's crisis intervention team and is adept at de-escalating situations involving young children. She has trained many young babysitters through her popular after-school babysitting class. When asked what she is proudest of, Karen states it is working with our neediest students over time and seeing them progress as they grow up. She embodies Lawrence loyalty. We thank her for her 30 years of service to the public schools of Brookline. Karen Miller. Gail Van Hatten, provided by Piper Smith Mumford. Gail has been in the role of guidance counselor for 30 years and has influenced countless lives. She is the essential beyond the classroom support for Pierce children. The wisdom she brings with her every day provides teachers and parents with the guidance they need. As children negotiate family trauma, playground sadness, jealousy, disappointment, and frustration, they each know that Ms. Van Hatten loves them. Gail famously says to kids, teachers, and parents that it is her job to get students back to their job of learning. Her ability to communicate with parents regarding the mundane as well as the traumatic can only be described as magical. Gail has difficult conversations with courage and is able to infuse these conversations with the grace that allows parents to feel empowered and encouraged. Gail Van Hatten is our rock. That is the theme of the work she has done year after year. She can be counted upon to be a calm and steadying voice in the midst of chaos and frustration. She finds the diamond in the rough and helps us all see the beauty that is often hidden in the turmoil. Her work ethic, her excellence in executing her duties, her compassion, and her consistent reminders for us all to be our very best selves urges us forward every day. Gail's commitment to Pierce resulted in her being nominated by her colleagues for the Caverly Award in 2012. Though not selected, she was overwhelmed by the many letters of support she received, and in true Gail fashion, expressed her gratitude for this recognition with heartfelt thanks and hugs all around. It is with our sincerest gratitude for her work that we thankfully acknowledge the unwavering support that Gail Van Hatten has provided Pierce School for these 30 years. Gail Van Hatten. So the last person I need to say something about told me she wasn't coming tonight. So that would be Janice McHugh. So I want to say a few words about Janice. It was recently.
Are you going to do it without crying?
No. Someone close to us all here recently said that the superintendent has many other jobs other than the superintendency, like the chief registrar for the district, as I recall, was the quote. And that's only partially true. The real registrar here for the district is Janice McHugh. The first person that so many people encounter when they come to this school system, before they've moved to this school system, is Janice McHugh. She is, in my mind, just the most wonderful ambassador for what we all do here. I think, and an amazing colleague to work with. I can't imagine not working with her. I said to someone earlier tonight, if Janice were to leave, we'd all find out how truly disorganized the superintendent is, because she keeps me on track every day. The other amazing thing that I want to just make sure I say about Janice is what a tremendous influence and impact she's had in the other position, in particular at Runkle School, that she held in this district. I have people nearly every week who come up to me and talk about us having stolen Janice from the Runkle School. Folks, this is like 12 years ago now, right? And people still talk about that and what a rock she was in terms of the office there and service to people there. And you know, she doesn't like these kinds of things, and just said, no, I won't be there. I don't do that kind of thing. But it's important for all of these people here and the wonderful work that they provide and the Janice McHughs of the world, that we take these opportunities to really acknowledge people for the amazing work that they do on behalf of our students and their colleagues and our families each and every day. So I just want to say how much I appreciate what Janice does and how much I appreciate what all of you do. Thank you so much.
We always say that one of our favorite moments is celebrating the students, but it's celebrating all of you who allow the students to have their amazing accomplishments. That is so meaningful for us also. So thank you. Thank you to everybody who spent the time writing these. Thank you for all of your years of service. For those of you who have, it's hundreds of years if you add it all up, which is terrifying. One thing we do at the high school graduation is we reflect back on what happened 50 years ago when the class from 50 years ago comes. And I won't start with a whole thing about what happened 30 years ago, but the world was a very different place. And when you all started in the Brookline schools, and it's changed so much, and you've changed with it and helped it change, helped us change. So thank you, and thank you for coming. We have a finance subcommittee report next. You are all welcome to stay. It would be the biggest audience
Please.
that Mr. Rowe has had in quite some time.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
You don't get any more after that.
All right. I think we're going to try to get started. Mr. Bouchard, Scott, see if we can close at least half the door. Robin, can you close at least half the door? Yeah, perfect. All right, we are going to.
There's a change.
We are going to get started with our finance subcommittee reports, perhaps. I'm not 100% sure, given the look I'm getting. Are we, what's wrong?
No.
Okay.
Madam
Okay,
Chair-
Mr. Chang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The subcommittee did not meet since the last school committee, and there's nothing of substance to report, except that Mr. Rowe and I are developing our next year's meeting schedules. Thank you.
Terrific. All right. Maybe these will be quick. This is our last meeting of the year, and so we're. Okay. Capital improvements, a brief or not brief report and a couple of votes from Mr. Pollack.
So I'll try to be brief. We have a couple of big capital projects moving forward. The Lawrence addition is out to bid, and we don't have bid results yet, but that is on the street, as they say. And the old Lincoln School project is in construction drawings and will go out to bid in July. And both of those projects are scheduled for use in September of next 2015. They will be occupied by us and by teachers and students. So those projects are going forward. Ms. Charlupski, do you know the date of the next Devotion School Building Committee meeting?
Yes,
When is that?
July. First, they have, what's happening is that the town staff need to. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll check the date to make sure. I think it's July 13th. It's the Friday of, hold on. No, excuse me. It's July 11th is the meeting, the next meeting. The staff will be going and meeting with MSBA to answer some questions, to find out some, to work on some of the issues around the building, and hopefully after that, we will have the go-ahead to go further in terms of developing the different designs. I think the other piece, and I'm not sure if you mentioned it last time or not, there will be a community meeting in September. Did you mention that?
Mention it again, yes.
Okay, I'll mention it again. So the school building committee will be meeting throughout the summer, every other week from July 11th on, working on designs. There will be 3 different designs that will be developed. Those are the ones that will be decided upon by the MSBA and Brookline by the 11th. We hope to then bring those designs to the community in September and have the committee, the school building committee, vote on the preferred design that will then go back to the MSBA for approval at their November meeting. I think
That's it?
That's
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
July 11th
So there's going to
is-
be, first, right now, MSBA has to approve our request to investigate a set of designs that we submitted, investigate all of them, and then assuming they say go ahead, then the committee will work with the architects and landscape architects and everybody else to further develop all of those designs, which will then be presented to the public, probably along with a preliminary recommendation by the committee in September. And
Actually,
then
we have that date, too, which would be important for people to know. It is September 10th at 7:00 PM at the Devotion School.
And then out of that will be a choice about how to design the school going forward, and then that'll have to go to MSBA and be reviewed and approved by them before we could move into schematic design on that project. And as the chair has told us, we have 2 votes. The first is a proposed vote to accept a gift of a sculpture for the Baker School. And Ms. Charlepsky, would you catch us up on this?
This has actually been a request by Bobby Allen, the former selectman, whose mother taught, I think, or was employed at the Baker School. She was an employee at the Baker School. There is a garden there presently that is in her memory, and he wanted to add to the garden a sculpture that I think everybody has seen. It was in the materials that Robin put out to us. It's a bronze sculpture. It actually matches the sculpture that's presently there in the circle in front of the school. It's the same sculptor who will be doing it. And this has been worked on by Mary Brown, and I looked at it, and Aaron Galantine approved it, and they would be ordering it through the Parks and Rec Department and installing it through them, and everything would be paid for. So the question before us is to accept this gift, and I would move that we do so.
Good, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Pollak? Any discussion, any questions? All right. All in favor?
Aye?
Excellent, it's unanimous.
Wonderful. We have a second vote, which is a proposed vote to permit fundraising for the purpose of replacing the small children, 2 to 5-year-old play structure at the Heath School. And this proposal is also coming to the school committee through the Parks Department, which has been talking to a donor who is interested in replacing this equipment, in funding the replacement of this equipment, and also in starting a foundation that would potentially fundraise on this issue. And so it's to the school committee to vote whether or not to permit fundraising at the Heath School or at the schools for this purpose. And Ms. Charlepsky, do you want to fill in any more?
Yes, I think I could. We actually crafted a policy a couple years back about how we would determine whether fundraising would be allowed for certain school improvements, and this sort of falls in the category of a more major improvement as opposed to, I don't know, some lighting in the auditorium or something like that where we don't usually approve. Here, it's a more substantial amount of money, and so looking at our policy, which Ms. Stone did, this seems to fall within our policy. The structure that they would like to replace is not handicapped accessible, and they would like to make one that is handicapped accessible. I think it sort of falls within our guidelines. This was something we would have done when we did the Heath School renovation, had we had enough money, and we weren't able to do it. So I think that I would recommend.
Parks has also said that the existing structure is beyond its useful life.
Exactly.
It's time for it to be
20 years
replaced.
old and is in need of replacement, actually is what they have said, including the surface area there, too. Parks and Rec would be involved, would be in charge, all the monies would go through Parks and Rec. It would be done through the town bidding process. It would be done with supervision of Parks and Rec for this particular project, which they do with all of our fields. And they also would have probably a community meeting in terms of some of the design issues. Or I know that they do plan to speak to the teachers and to Vicki Milstein, our early childhood principal, in terms of the needs for the school.
And has the school principal been consulted
Yes,
and
yes,
supports the project?
Well, actually, I think so.
Mr. Rowe, do you know? Mr. Rowe, do you know? Principal's been consulted on this project?
Let me see. I'm pretty sure so. Hold
All
on
right,
one second.
we need to make sure that
Well,
she's
yeah.
involved
Then
in this.
I would move that we do it with the proviso that it's approved by the school principal, since this is our last meeting, and if they wanted to, I'm just looking to see if there was anything written here. I was pretty sure, I'm sorry, I didn't follow up on that one.
So are you going to move it? Do you want to move it?
Ms. Charlevsky has moved it, I will second.
Okay. So, discussion. I just had a question, which,
That's true, yeah, actually, Ms. Scotto just mentioned here that we would have done it during the construction, so that she did know about something then. But I think we still should make sure that she's.
Subject to, right, the motion is subject to the support of the
Yes.
school principal.
okay, good. So just discussion. I mean, there was some discussion about this, whether or not we have to vote to permit fundraising. So
Well-
do we want to talk a little bit about why we're voting to permit fundraising?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the issue is that you wouldn't want somebody to go out there and fundraise and then find out that the school committee wasn't going to accept the money for something. I think they felt that they needed our approval, and I think it's the proper way to do it, actually, to come to us first, say, this is our idea, and the way it's phrased is that we would
Vote to permit fundraising.
vote to permit fundraising. So we're not saying you have to, we're not saying, but if you were to, we would be willing to accept for this project,
For this purpose.
for this purpose.
Okay.
Is
Okay.
that clear enough?
All right. Sure. Any other discussion? Mr. Chang?
Just a quick clarifying question. There was a mention of a anonymous donor, is that correct? To this project?
No.
No, there isn't. Okay. Somehow I heard that. All right, never mind.
Okay. Further discussion? All right, we're ready to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Pollak?
No, that is the capital improvements subcommittee report.
Well done. And Ms. Coyne, if we're going to send a thank you note for the gift of the sculpture, if I need to do something on that. Is that okay? Thank you. If I don't remember, please remind me. Good, which we are very grateful for. Curriculum. Back to you, Ms. Charlepski.
Yes, I seem to be talking a lot today. I'll try and be quick. This is a proposed vote to accept the funds from the Brookline High School 21st Century Fund. As everybody knows here, when we get funds from any source, we have to approve it, just as we did with the possibility of raising funds. But here it's every year when the 21st Century Fund works together with the headmaster and their board to raise money for programs, we then approve those programs. We approve usually the program to begin at the high school through curriculum, and then we approve the monies that come in for it. So what you have maybe before you is the 2.4 FTEs that they will be, full-time equivalents that they will be supporting in the following way. 0.5 of administration, 0.2 for PMM, which is the math, hold on. It used to be called a human math experience. Now it is called, and I wrote it down because I couldn't remember, Perspectives of a Mathematical Mind, which has gotten a lot of good reviews at the high school. Content Reading Initiative for 1.1, which is a system-wide initiative for 1.1 FTEs. And Design, oh God, these names become difficult. Thank you. Design for Understanding in Field Science. That's the one where there's a combination of a science teacher and art teacher working together to teach children how to observe things in nature and to draw them, and through the drawing to refine their observational skills. And then the last one is the senior year alternative. It's a 0.2 FTE for a teacher to develop together with a cohort of hers that they're working together on an alternative to the senior year or to the last half of the senior year. It hasn't been totally worked out just yet. So there's some funding to work on developing that program.
So are you moving it?
I am moving it.
Excellent. Is there a second? Ms. Gatto, any discussion? Questions? I think the one question we always ask when we accept funds from, for educational purposes is the difference between a pilot or any expectation of a burden on future budgets. So I assume.
And that's something that Dr. Fisher-Mueller and myself at the program committee level and the senior staff, when they see these programs, look at very closely to make sure that whatever it is can be continued by the system later on, if it's determined that it's appropriate.
Or it will be evaluated, was my.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Well, right, yeah, I do. So, I mean, I think over the last couple of years in particular, we've emphasized to the fund that given what we're about to go through in terms of growth, that those programs are going to get a much harder look, that probably in many cases, it's not going to be possible for us to pick up funding at some point, that they should be thinking about things as longer-term ideas, right? That the old 3-year model and then turn it over to the school system is gone, right? And we've emphasized that. I know we did when we met with them about these programs even for this year, and we'll need to continue to do that as we begin to experience a more rapid growth at the high school.
If I could add to that, one of the things that we've been very careful about is that if it's a course, for instance, that we've been able to, if it's a fully subscribed course, it might be something that could be continued, that we would be able to pick up because it's one course or another course type of thing.
So so if I'm hearing this properly, the idea is that the funds for innovation are exciting and they are welcomed.
Absolutely.
That our teachers are excited about them, our children benefit, that there used to be an expectation that after 3 years of foundation funding, the school would more or less automatically pick up that course.
Correct.
And given many, many other things that are happening right now, that expectation is no longer automatic, and there is a much sharper pencil, if you will, being applied, and a much harder look being applied to the results of the program and how they fit into the overall course curriculum at the high school, given everything else that the high school is trying to accomplish.
As usual, you said it perfectly.
Is that fair?
Yes, yes.
Excellent, okay. Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our last,
21st Century Fund.
thank, yes, and yet another thank you note, I think, for me to write, or someone to write. Excellent. Government relations, Ms. Stone is not here, but we do, I believe, have a able stand-in. We do not.
I don't think on this one.
Or maybe we don't. I don't think there is any
I don't think
update.
there's a report.
Okay, good. Well, I don't think there's any update. Okay, good. Negotiations. That one I do know we have an able stand-in. Mr. Glover, for your first, your maiden voyage on the realm of subcommittee reports. We're so excited to hear what you have to say.
You might not be after you hear it. But thank you, Madam Chair. On negotiations, just make sure I didn't jump ahead to policy. We've had 2 negotiation sessions so far with the BEU, mostly preliminary items around ground rules, a review of the FY15 budget. We will be continuing negotiations in the summer months, and we currently have meetings scheduled for Monday, July 14th, and Wednesday, August 13th. And I think there will be further update for the school committee at the July 8th workshop, or whatever date the workshop ends up ultimately being. AFSHME has also asked that we begin collective bargaining for the 3 units that it represents: custodians, food service workers, and secretaries. We will be negotiating these contracts sequentially, not all together. Ms. Stone, Mr. Rowe, and Dr. Allen will be the school committee's negotiating team for the AFSHME negotiations. Tentative dates have been set for 2 sessions in July with AFSHME.
Excellent, thank you. If there are no questions, policy review.
Sure.
Mr. Glover, pinch hitting for Ms. Cox.
Sure. Thank you again, Madam Chair. The policy subcommittee met on June 11th. During that meeting, we discussed revisions needed for both the discipline policy as well as staff tutoring policies. With regard to student discipline, there are new regulations on student discipline that take effect on July 1, 2014. The changes pertain to students who are under suspension and expulsion, and/or expulsion, and also have some implications for reporting of attendance. Town Council Jocelyn Murphy has recommended that the superintendent issue an advisory to the headmaster and school principals outlining the changes that are required in advance of the July 1st date. Dr. Lapini will be sending a packet with all the appropriate documents. Ms. Murphy noted that our current practice is largely in line with the new regulations, with a few exceptions that will be addressed when we pick this up. Following a comprehensive review. The changes to state law are too extensive for us to fully deal with before July 1st. To help us with our further work on this, Dr. Lapini is putting together a working group that will meet through the summer to review all of our existing policies and make recommendations to the subcommittee in the fall for changes to the policies. Dr. Jackson will serve as the liaison to that working group. With regard to staff tutoring, the subcommittee considered a first draft by Ms. Stone regarding our policy on outside tutoring by school staff, as our current policy is somewhat in conflict with state law. We were pleased that Dr. Wender Shubo could join us for our discussion, and her insight was greatly appreciated. We have not yet arrived at a first reading draft. The discussion is still fluid, and there are a number of points that we're still considering. So we will continue to work on this in the fall. In the meantime, the administration will send out an advisory to staff that states that tutoring cannot be done in the building or during the school day. It will define tutoring and related services and provide the timeline and process for the school committee's review of the policies in the fall. And that's it.
Great. Thank you. Questions? All right. Thank you very much. Moving right along, the Override Study Committee. You all will be pleased to know that voting has begun on the Override Study Committee. There were a couple of important updates since our last meeting. One is that there is a tool that models the effects of both policy changes as well as different cost reductions and revenue, non-tax revenue enhancements. And when you add it all up, it models what the override could look like under different circumstances. At our last meeting, Mr. Cronin, the Deputy Town Administrator, called it awesome. Some of us almost died on the spot with happiness and tried to end the committee on that note because we were so excited. But he was very complimentary of it and thought it could be useful as a model, as a tool, as Mr. Rowe said a couple weeks ago to us, as a model, not a calculator, but a model for how to understand the different interplays between the cost and the non-tax revenues and the impact on overrides. The subcommittee reports have started to be voted. We're about a quarter to a third of the way through. I think there's still quite keen interest in landing the plane of the committee and making sure that the fact base is solid, and we're heading towards consensus on the fact base. And also, there's interest among folks to try to create a set of observations for sure, and potentially recommendations to the selectmen that will help guide their decision-making in the structuring process. So the next two meetings are, given the urgency of and the keen interest in landing planes, we're actually going to meet twice next week, next Tuesday night and next Wednesday night. So you can celebrate your last school committee meeting of the year by attending both of those events with myself and Mr. Glover, if you are so inclined. Any other liaisons? Mr. Chang?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Human Relations Youth Resource Commission met last Wednesday. It was a very short meeting because of the 8 commissioners that attended. 4 resigned that evening, including Brooks and Mary Ella Ames, Larry Oney, as well as Cruz Sanabria, I should say. The principal reason around those resignation was because of the passing of warrant Article 10, which is the new bylaw for the Human Relation Youth Resource Commission, and they felt that it did not contain the authority that they were looking for, so they resigned en masse that evening. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Chang, and we'll look forward to an update from the Board of Selectmen on next steps. Any other liaisons? All right. Then we will turn to public comment. Are we?
No, the recommendation is that you don't, but.
All right. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people who are signed up to speak on public comment. So you typically give 3 minutes per speaker when there are more than a small number of speakers. I will say that I hope you all saw the communication from the superintendent that he is not intending to recommend a vote tonight on Park. So we will discuss that at 9 o'clock, but public comment is docketed now and you're here. So we can get started. Lisa Geisbond. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. I'm Lisa Geisbond, a Brookline parent and executive director of Citizens for Public Schools. And I was encouraged to hear that Dr. Lupini recommended a delay in your decision on the transition to Park. That allows more time to examine and discuss a long list of concerns about the new tests, including fairness to students with disabilities and English language learners, inequitable access to technology, cost, time taken from teaching and learning, privacy of student data, and the adequacy of the tests themselves. A significant recent development was that the Medford School Committee reversed its vote and will stay with MCAS next year after learning that the hold harmless provision applies to districts but not to teachers who would be held accountable based on PARCC test scores. And this concerned the Medford School Committee and strikes me as unfair. So the major rationale for choosing PARCC for next year seems to be that a move to PARCC is inevitable, and so we owe it to our teachers and students to let them practice. But given the widespread pushback against the tests, PARCC does not appear so inevitable after all. And while I do respect Dr. Lupini's concerns about preparation, as a parent, I think there are other more important considerations. Dr. Lupini suggested that those with concerns take them to the State Board of Education, and I plan to do so next week. However, the State Board is appointed, not an elected body. Is Ruth here? Ruth? Present company excluded Ruth Kaplan. The State Board members often seem detached from local concerns, for example, those of students with disabilities. And I look to you, our elected representatives, to stand up for our students who may be harmed by policies imposed by the state or even more distant policymakers. In fact, the Cambridge Superintendent and School Committee cited concerns for students with disabilities and English language learners when they voted to stay with MCAS for next year. At your last meeting, we heard from and were deeply moved in some cases by 2 Caverly Award-winning teachers. We have reason to be proud of our extraordinary teachers, but I urge you to do more than simply honor them. Why not listen and respond to what they say about what it takes to do an excellent job of teaching our children? Your colleague, Caverly winner Barbara Scotto, has expressed concerns about the learning time that will be lost to PARCC tests.
30 seconds.
Caverly winner Nancy Springer said, quote, "I'm not opposed to making changes in curriculum and student assessment, but these changes must encourage collaboration and respect the diverse experiences children bring with them into the classroom. We owe this to the next generation of teachers. We owe this to our students and the next generation of teachers who will teach them," unquote. When the very teachers we honor for their excellence suggest that we slow down and consider the impact of policy changes on our students, don't you think we should listen? I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kaplan, 3 minutes. It's always
Good evening.
wonderful to have you back.
It's nice to be back. I feel like I've come full circle. So, hi, everybody. I'm Ruth Kaplan, and as a member of the current State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, I have had a fair amount of exposure to PARCC. From what I've observed, I have really yet to understand what features of the proposed new assessment system, which will be voted on by the board in the fall of 2015, are superior to the current MCAS. The supporters tout this test for its online features, but this is actually extremely problematic in view of the equity issues around technology that exist from district to district. I attended the Take the Test experience at Brookline High a few weeks ago, and nearly all the teachers, parents, and even the high school student found the online aspect of this particular test very difficult to manipulate. And like Lisa, I'm sorry I missed the beginning of her remarks, I'm particularly concerned about the frustration factor as it impacts special ed students and ELL students. The question of whether appropriate accommodations are in place is a question. It's a serious question. Remember that unlike the MCAS, the PARCC is a timed test. Several of the teachers who spoke at the high school after the experience believe that even SPED students who may well be entitled to extra time will feel stigmatized and may opt out of the option to take that time precisely for that reason. This was not an issue with an untimed test, but PARCC is a timed test. At the sample test day that I attended at Brookline High, Several of the teachers commented that the content was inappropriately difficult for their students. This was both for the math and the English language arts portions of the test. To give one example of a word that none of us in the room knew, the word arrogate, not arrogant, appeared on the test, and not one of us in the room, 25 highly educated adults, could define that word. In short, in my opinion, Park is not ready for prime time and will only create an even larger distraction away from teaching and learning in Brookline classrooms, as teachers will need to determine how to allocate that computer time over several days of testing, and this will surely disrupt their school's primary mission. And just to be clear, there is currently no Plan B for any other test other than MCAS, should Park fail the test after this so-called test drive. Finally, I truly believe that no member of this school committee or anybody that's voting on these kinds of decisions should take this vote without the experience of spending an hour online taking this test. Decide for yourselves whether this is a fair test. Is this district equipped with the technology to administer it? How much more time from learning will be taken away this year, this coming year, for preparation for an experimental test that may not even be approved? I want to commend Superintendent Lupini for acknowledging the need to take the time to be more thoughtful about this decision. Nothing in life or in education is inevitable or should be inevitable, and certainly not Park. Remember when we all heard that MCAS is here to stay? Well, how's that working out? If even one more year of Park testing in any way undermines the confidence and learning potential of our most vulnerable students, we are committing educational malpractice. As you make your decision, please consider in particular the students who struggle the most in our system and the permanent damage that they will endure from tests that can unintentionally undermine their love of learning and their motivation.
Ms. Kaplan, we're at 4 minutes. I just want to make sure everyone else
I
has
have
a
one more
chance.
sentence. and I'm
Okay.
finished. Thank you. You have the right and the moral obligation to just say no until the state has a solid plan to protect our most vulnerable learners. And I thank you for your time, and I certainly thank you for your wonderful service to the town of Brookline and for everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Adam Weiner? Weiner? 3 minutes.
Hello, thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. My name is Adam Weiner. I live on Tappan Street. I have 2 small children, one in kindergarten and one soon to arrive in kindergarten. I teach at Wellesley College, so I have some, well, for 20 years now, I've taught at Wellesley College, and I have some experience in the field of education. I want to urge you strongly to reject the Park and the rest of the Common Core curriculum as it comes down at us. And I speak from 3 vantage points: as a father of young children, as a teacher, as an educator, and also as a citizen. I guess I'll start with the last point. I see this whole initiative as lacking a constitutional basis, as a violation, and an attempt by the federal powers to arrogate, let's use that word, a control that they shouldn't have. The 10th Amendment of the Constitution is pretty clear about this point. The powers that are not delegated to the federal government and are not forbidden by states are for the states and the people, and that includes education. It's a very basic principle, and we can stand up to that principle here in Brookline, and as other municipalities and states have begun to do. As an educator, I just want to point out that I was blindsided by this initiative. It's true that I teach at the college level and not in the K through 12 system, but I'm shocked at the speed with which this has been rolled out and a lot of the secrecy behind it. And as far as I know, standardized testing and educational standards applied across the board have never been proven effective as an educational tool. I mean, why should we leap to this assumption that, especially after 20 years of MCAS, which I think most people would agree was a failure.
30 seconds.
As a father, I'm concerned about the mining of data that is going to be part of this program, this initiative, and this system. And I'm concerned about the stress that my children will be subjected to as they're tested. And I'm concerned, frankly, about their education. I think that their education is going to be compromised. As an educator, I can tell you that in my experience, it is individual initiatives, creativity on the part of the teachers, and an ability to meet a student where his knowledge at the point his knowledge has progressed to, that
Could you
provides
wrap
for
up, please?
good education.
Okay.
And these are principles that the Common Core Initiative ignores.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Dr. Wendershubo.
Thank you. The BEU applauds Dr. Lupini's recommendation that Brookline step back from Park. It allows us to think more deeply about where we're headed. We hope that Brookline will take advantage of the time and to do what it does best, to lead. We ask that you work with us to gain support for raising adequate public money in a fair and progressive way, and putting that, along with the money now being spent on high-stakes testing and its promotion, into doing what it really takes to achieve equity, not just in Brookline, but in every zip code. Now, why don't I simply put my sights on the Brookline schools alone? I don't, because we find ourselves in a situation that implicates us in interrelated decisions linking us to Mattapan, to Holyoke, and to the attacks on teachers' rights in California, whether we choose to focus on it or not. Now, in last week's tab, I read about a Brookline resident who questions Brookline's expenditures on 300 students of color from Boston. On this day, 50 years ago, a filibuster against the Civil Rights Act was overcome. But the critic of METCO is not focused on the principle articulated by Dr. King, that we are tied together in a single garment of destiny. Instead, he pits Boston against Brookline and says that Brookline is subsidizing Boston, and unnecessarily so. No matter that the manipulation of mortgages of families of color by banks, the redlining now back in the courts, continues to destroy Boston neighborhoods, causing an exodus of those who can find their way into the Brookline schools. The achievement gap, measured by test scores, will remain as long as we turn a blind eye to what is captured by a concept that Bill Lupini clued me into, and that is a society-wide opportunity hoarding. How disingenuous is the recent California court decision, engineered by one billionaire? It pits teachers against students, claiming that the civil rights of students of color can only be secured by throwing out a century's worth of protections against favoritism and discrimination in the workplace. What does that decision deliver? The sudden non-renewal last week of Gus Morales, a Holyoke teacher just elected to the same job I have. Gus publicly questioned data walls, which humiliates students by posting their test scores.
30
in order.
seconds.
We have our own data walls in Brookline. They don't mention the individual names, just the racial communities as a whole, and they reinforce a model of competition instead of what King called our inescapable network of mutuality. Under our new leadership in the MTA, we publicly plan to target the economic opportunity gap for families in every zip code, to call for funding of wraparound services, and for lessening caseloads and class sizes while respecting teacher autonomy. One more sentence. This lets educators bring needed services to their students and to creatively build meaningful relationships with them that tap each and every child's unique potential and creativity. Work with us. We can do it. Thanks.
Thank you for coming. Jen Rosewood. Three minutes, thank you.
I'm Jen Rosewood. I teach at the high school. Good evening, Superintendent Lupini, members of the school committee, members of the community. Last meeting, I shared with you the voices of my students and their dismaying and lackluster experiences with MCAS. Tonight, I speak to you from my experience as a teacher, one with 15 years in the classroom at the middle school level, high school level, college, and graduate levels, including teacher education at Brown University. Thank you, Superintendent Lupini, for your courageous proposal to delay the vote on Park. We do not have all the facts on this test, and many educators and parents are in the dark. Last month, I took the 10th grade English test and found it developmentally inappropriate. It is difficult to navigate. It does not correspond with our curriculum. It asks students questions about rhetorical strategy that college English majors would struggle to answer. It takes a sterile, formulaic approach to text that is not only inappropriate for teenagers, but has become academically obsolete. In fact, this test seems to have little to do with college and career readiness and seems rather to be designed as a sorting mechanism to segregate and stigmatize students who do not possess the digital literacy or facility with arcane tasks that the test prioritizes. So what to do? I want to read to you 3 statements I know you are familiar with. They come from the Brookline Public Schools vision statement. 1, each child's unique path to achievement is supported in academically exciting and programmatically rich environments. I want to ask you, does a high-stakes standardized test help each child move along the path to achievement in an academically exciting and rich way? 2, teaching professionals will be encouraged to innovate and inspire each other and their students. Does a high-stakes standardized test encourage teaching professionals to innovate and inspire each other and their students? 3, staff gets to know students intellectually, developmentally, and culturally. Does a high-stakes standardized test inspire or enable staff to get to know their students intellectually, developmentally, and culturally?
30 seconds.
I urge you to take a step back and seriously consider these questions and resist the pressure to make a decision that does not fit our values. Park is not who Brookline is. A for-profit test company focused solely on expanding its market share is not who Brookline is. Let's decide together who we are and how we can truly help our children grow and learn and succeed. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Meg Hitchcock-Smith? You have 3 minutes. I'll give you a 30-second warning.
Good evening. My name is Meg Hitchcock-Smith. I'm here to tell you my thoughts on MCAS and other standardized tests. When I hear the name MCAS, I think of a few things. Test, help, annoying. But the word that affects me most is nervous. Now, why should I be nervous? This test is like any other test. But it's not, because the school, the state, and the teachers put pressure on you. I'm not talking about the good amount of pressure, which is telling you to study. No, I'm talking about the overwhelming pressure that makes your stomach feel like it's in knots and you feel very sick, because you've learned to fear this test. Older peers will tell you this is the worst test ever, and I would rather do a day of geometry than take this test. If you were told that when you were 7, you will be afraid, because when you're 7, you believe everything older kids tell you. With this test, you don't see your results. You don't know what mistakes you made, and all you get is a grade. But you don't improve because you don't know what you did wrong. You can only guess, but you don't learn. We spend 2 to 3 weeks before each MCAS preparing. We could have fit 3 more math units into those weeks, but we had to prepare most of the day. I would have loved to learn more social studies, but I couldn't because we had to do pages of MCAS prep without a break. I don't know how any new standardized test will be any different. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. That's all we have on the sign-up sheet. If there's anyone else here who would like to speak on public comment, park, or any other topic.
Hi, my name is Kira Flynn Carson, and I teach in SWS. And I didn't prepare anything, but what I wanted to say is what I love about teaching in SWS, and Ethan is a student in SWS, and Jess Windershubo graduated from SWS, is that I think SWS embodies the values that Jen spoke of in the vision, where kids are excited to learn because they are really engaged in the topic, and teachers are allowed to innovate because we can come up with our own curriculum. And I just wanted to say how meaningful it is for me to teach in that environment and to learn with kids in that environment and to speak against standardized testing because of the culture that impedes that kind of environment. So I'll be brief. That's all I need to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to make public comment? Okay. It's not our policy to comment after public comment, so I will say thank you. In a couple of docket items from now, at 9 o'clock, we are scheduled to discuss the superintendent's recommendation on park, so you're welcome to stick around until then. There's one item in between. Thank you very much. All right, next docket item, the superintendent's report.
Thank you.
Dr. Lupini.
Thank you. You have a copy of the report, and the report tonight is a series of introductions. First, let me mention the announcement that I've included in the report that we sent to the devotion community last evening, and that is that Joe Connolly, who worked with us as interim principal at the Runkle School in 09-10, will return to Brookline to serve as interim principal at Devotion School for the 14-15 school year. Joe, as you know, managed the lead up to the building project at that school, did a marvelous job, and has expressed to me on a number of occasions his interest in returning here. When I called Joe to tell him about our situation, as I said to someone today, he was actually on his way to an interview in another community, and told me that he was going to turn that job down and come to Brookline. So we're thrilled that Joe's coming back. Joe's the former superintendent of schools in Stoneham and Tri-Town, and has worked every year since his retirement in one role or another as an interim principal, interim superintendent, acting business manager, and even an interim town administrator for a couple of years. And so Joe will actually be with us next week. We're finalizing right now, but I believe it'll be Tuesday of next week he'll spend at the Devotion School, and will be here as of July 1st, and we're thrilled. I also, in this, I was at the Devotion graduation today. I want to thank David O'Hare, Lacey Bacot, and the entire Devotion staff for their work during the last couple of weeks. Dave and Lacey in particular have just done amazing work during that time and really deserve our thanks. So let me introduce some people to you. As you know, Kate Donnelly, who's here, is retiring at the end of the year, and we're sorry, Kate, that you are, and we wish you just the best. You've done a marvelous job, and I've really enjoyed working with you. Thank you. Our new coordinator of school health services is Tricia Laham, who's here, who currently serves as nurse at the Baker School and has since 1999. There's a nice bio on Tricia here, but we are thrilled to have Tricia moving into this position. She's done a marvelous job, right, Mary, as a nurse at the Baker School. Extraordinary, yeah. And I know while Mary's sorry to see, and Mary and teachers at the Baker School are sorry to see her leave, that everyone, nurses and people who work in other buildings as well, are just thrilled that she's going to be moving into this position. So Trish, hi. Tricia Laham.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited and looking forward to this new chapter in my career. I would like to thank Kate Donnelly, who has been an unbelievable boss, colleague, mentor, and friend. And the Brookline schools and the school nurses are richer because of her. My nurse colleagues are all extraordinary, and I'm proud and excited to be leading them. Thank you.
That's good. That's the sit down before they get a chance to ask a question strategy. I like it. I like it very much.
It was nice and efficient.
Yes, it
Just
really
like
was.
beautiful.
Really good.
But I'm not sure they know what we're saying because they may
Ms.
not
Charlovsky,
be aware.
Ms. Charlovsky, is there something you'd like to add to the discussion? Since Dr. Lupini seems to have opened the door
I know,
very
really.
wide.
Yeah, he did. He
Yeah,
did. If
really.
he hadn't said anything, I wouldn't have said
You would,
anything.
no, I caught your eye.
I just don't
understood.
want,
Sure about
I
that,
don't want
Ms.
Trish
Charlovsky.
to feel, like we don't care enough that we don't ask a
Yeah.
question,
Yeah. I think I think she'll be okay.
She'll be all right.
Would you
Well,
stipulate that
she's
you
from-
understand that we care? Do you feel, excellent. For the record, she feels the love, so we can move on.
Okay, then. As you know, Pat Vonnegut is retiring as early childhood program coordinator at the end of the year, and Regina Watts, who's here, will be taking her place in that position. She has served since 1989 in the district as a school psychologist and a special education team facilitator. She's had a leadership role in the early education intake team and been responsible for staff training, and brings a depth of knowledge in early education program and strong administrative and supervisory skills. Regina, we're thrilled that you're going to take this position. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should I say something?
You
or should
certainly
I
may.
field
Sure.
questions?
So you certainly,
The longer you stay there, the more questions will be generated,
So I'd
so
say-
it's up to
Okay,
you.
so
I'd
why
actually
don't I
say
say
something,
something quick
yeah.
then? Thank you. I'm honored and humbled. I'm especially humbled when working in an amazing department and getting so much support from people on the school committee, Helen Charlepsky, Dr. Lupini, Peter Rowe, and Vicki Milstein, finding us homes all around the district. I have the nicest office I've ever had since 1989. When, Dr. Lupini, I started, I shared office with Janice McHugh.
ah,
And you're right, she is fabulous in terms
Wonderful.
of checking residency. Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks, Regina. I'm going to skip to the other person who I know is here, and that's Dan Green. Dan Green, what?
Well, there's no one that this school committee likes to torture more than Mr.
There really isn't, that's true.
I'm going to sit down fast, though. I know
think-
that's the way to go.
That would be wise. You might want to, no.
So, school committee members know Dan Green. Dan Green teaches in the high school social studies department. He's been active at the high school in a number of activities, including serving on the Teaching and Learning Council, advisor for Model UN, and the Cambodia, in particular the Brookline Cambodia Partnership, and program leader and founder of the Global Leadership Academy. And Dan did a terrific internship a number of years ago at the Runkle School. And Dan, we are, as I said to you the other day, we're thrilled to have you as part of the leadership team among the elementary people and as vice principal at Pierce School. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Two years ago, when I started thinking about the possibility of going to administrative position, I thought that whatever I move into is going to have to be really exceptional. And the reason why is that I have absolutely loved my time as a history teacher at Brookline High School. I've not only appreciated the support I've received from the school committee and Dr. Lupini and Dr. Fisher-Mueller and countless other people in launching some of the global education initiatives that have brought me to this committee many, many times, but working daily with amazing students like Ethan Kahn, with colleagues like Kira and Jen, who are here tonight, who've inspired me to become a better professional and teacher in person, and parents, who are the most active parent base I've ever worked with. in the 4 different communities that I've taught in. But when I found out about the Pierce position, I realized that this is the position, this is the opportunity that really was worth moving into and leaving this incredible job at BHS. I'm thrilled to work with Piper. I can say it because she's not here right now. She's regarded as a legend at Brookline High School, and I'm looking forward to learning from her and John and the Pierce team. And I'm looking forward to coming back to the school committee as much in the coming 7 years as I have in the past 7 years, but this time wearing my Pierce cap. So thanks again for everything.
Thank you.
I'd sit down, Dan, before they come up with something. Oh,
No,
sorry.
no,
I'm not.
You stayed.
Stayed.
You stayed there.
We knew she
I'm
was gonna call
not,
me back.
I am not going to ask a question, but I am going to reflect on the fact that we have 3 wonderful people who have been promoted from within the system. And I think that's really special. And I'm very happy that our system can have people who are wonderful in the positions they're in and be able to be promoted to positions that, administrative positions. And so I wish you all well. And I know all of you, so I appreciate it even more.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
saying that. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks so much.
So we may have our other person arrive, and I'll introduce her then, but let me talk a little bit about our new Associate Dean of I heard the elevator bell. Let me tell you about our new Associate Dean at Brookline High School, Kayla Dorsey Chumasi. I think I got that right. Kayla is coming to us after working as an administrative intern at Boston Latin, where she oversaw instructional development, assessed curriculum and student data, and planned relevant professional development. She also was involved there in instructional rounds. Before that, she was a social studies teacher for 5 years at Doctors Charter School in Miami, Florida. I met with her yesterday. She has a particular interest in programming and academic achievement around students of color, and I know that if she gets here tonight, if not, we'll have her back in the fall, so you get a chance to meet her, and I know you will enjoy the opportunity to meet with her. We are really looking forward to her coming on as in the role of Dean of Students at Brookline High School. And I think that's my report. Thank you, unless you have questions.
Good, thank you. Questions for Dr. Lupini?
And you are certainly welcome to stay.
I just want to echo Ms. Charlowski's comment. I mean, we do like to torture people when they come, but in all seriousness, we love it when the talent that we have here wants to stay and wants to be part of the leadership within Brookline. So thank you all for staying and making this your home and the place that you want to enrich with your skills and experiences. So thank you. All right. We are on to our next agenda item, which is a discussion of a vote on a recommendation to participate or not participate in the 2014-15 Park Field Test. So since things have changed since we wrote this docket, I will ask Dr. Lupini if he wants to introduce this idea for us. Presumably, we could move the vote and then have the discussion, but it might be better in this instance to have the discussion first.
Sure. The recommendation is really based around what I believe is in a couple of areas, the need for additional information. I think you heard some of that in testimony, in public hearing, of public comment. I do have significant, you know from the beginning of this year, as we look to the field test, that I've told you that I in particular have pushed the department on the issue of the untimed nature of MCAS versus the timed nature of Park. There are, I'll put that under the bigger heading of, we are being promised a set of accommodations that, quite frankly, I haven't seen yet. And I did spend some time, I was at the department on Wednesday, I think that's when I got back, Wednesday, for our officers' meeting with the commissioner. And I did spend some time with people responsible for accommodations for the exam, and they are promising the full array of their accommodations for spring, but unable to show them now. And my concern is, and quite frankly, I'll take a little bit of exception. I believe one of the main reasons that Medford made the choice that they made was because we learned in the last few weeks that once you opted in on June 30th, you were locked in, right? And so my concern became that if we opted in and those accommodations weren't ready, that we might not want to stay in. So I want some more time to see if the accommodations are developed and rolled out in a time frame before the October 1st final decision. I mean, I will say, you know, if you follow any of this, and I do, I'm a little bit of a, I don't know what, but when it comes to following the national conversation, there is an interesting national conversation. I think in many ways linking Common Core and these testing programs where they don't belong linked, but that's what's happening, and I think there's some question about the long-term sustainability as some states are opting out, and I think a few more months of being able to pay attention to that isn't a bad thing. There's a report today that Louisiana's governor's made a decision to take them out of the Common Core and Park. That would take Park to I believe it's 13 states if that were to happen. So, you know, we would have an additional number of months to study this. I will say, this recommendation does not come without potential costs. I mean, we had plans to do certain things during the summer months that now we'll have to decide, do we make those plans, do we look at those issues, knowing that we might be spending time that we're not going to actually utilize. We'll have to make that choice, right, in council with the chair and chair and vice chair. But at this point, I think, quite frankly, some of these other issues, particularly for me, because as I said, you've heard it so often from me, around the accommodations issues, are important enough to get some additional information. There is, I will say, as I said here, you know, we've been told a number of times that the only districts that are guaranteed to be part of Park are those that submit by June 30th. And the data that I've seen suggests that more than 50% of the state is opting for Park. That's the data I've seen, right? I think at least it's a 50-50 proposition across the Commonwealth. Again, from the data I've seen, and I've seen a pretty complete set of profile of where districts are opting. So there is some chance, although I believe that's minimal at this point. I do believe they have funding to adjust. As I was told recently, somewhere up to 70% of the districts could participate in Park, and they could fund that. So I think that chance exists. I think it's minimal that we would be closed out by delaying a decision till September. So my recommendation is that we delay, that you give us an opportunity to take a look at a number of these other things, to report on them over the summer to you as we learn more, and to come back to you with a recommendation at one of our initial September meetings.
All right. So I had a couple things that I wanted to say. I'm not sure if others have things they want to say also. So first, I will just speak for myself and not for the committee here, which is that my willingness to hold off reflects sort of three things. One is the fact that 3 of our members are not here tonight, right. All 3 of whom have very thoughtful, considered opinions on this issue. They have backgrounds in education. 2 of them have backgrounds in education. One of them is a longstanding school committee member. So I respect their absence. So I think that's one piece. Right. They have been part of robust discussions up until tonight through curriculum subcommittee meeting and through the last meeting and the meeting before that. But I've been in personal conversation with each of them individually over the last couple weeks, and I think that they were interested in being here for this discussion, and longstanding commitments meant that they couldn't be. So that is one thing that's in my personal calculus. And the second is we always do trust and take very seriously the opinions of our professional leaders, as opposed to any other opinions. We take those opinions very seriously. And I think the third one is certainly the fact that more information about implementation is clearly, would be helpful, given that it's such a work in progress, and not just a work in progress, but a shifting work in progress. So those are the three things that are on my mind. I guess the one other thing that I would say is that, again, speaking only for myself, that it does not reflect on my part an opposition to Park. And I think that's important because what's been astonishing to me personally watching this over the last number of years, and certainly the last number of months, is the dramatic level of misinformation out there about Common Core state standards which are standards and not a curriculum, about the relationship between the Common Core state standards and Park, which is an assessment of those standards. They are separate, they're related, obviously, but separate. There is hyperbole. I think it's safe to say that it's bordering on hysteria in some parts of the country. And so what's disappointing to me as somebody who works with educators professionally is that so much of the rhetoric has actually been focused not on the students and their best interests and what we want them to know, but it's been focused on the adults and focused on the politics of this. Just a couple very specific examples. The idea that this is a top-down government, national government imposition on the states, when in fact the reality of it was pretty much the opposite. It was designed by governors and the National Governors Association. It was designed by Republicans, Democrats. I mean, it was really a bipartisan design process. There were experts involved. And so even just some of the basic facts of what is this thing, all the way down to very specific objections around equity, and I'll just pick technology since that's the one that seems to be of particular interest to some people. I mean, the idea that it's inequitable, that some children can't type as fast as other children, or some children are more comfortable in an online environment than other children, and it's inequitable to test them on that because some will do better than others, and there's inadequate technology in some districts rather than other districts. All of those are interesting, but my response is that that's almost precisely what I would like to know. I would precisely like to know where computer skills are inequitably distributed across children, across districts, because that's exactly the sort of thing that we need to fix. And if you don't know it, you can't fix it. And so for my part, there are many things that people consider objections which are valid, and certainly the implementation is complicated, but there are actually many, many pieces of this public discourse which I find misinformation and troubling. Sometimes it's just honest misinformation, and sometimes it's not just honest misinformation. So at any rate, that's my personal thought on this, and I'm quite keen to hear thoughts of others who are here, and recognizing that we have 3 members who aren't here. Ms. Gatto?
Well, first of all, I am not basically opposed to testing. I used the MCAS test for any number of years as a teacher. I felt I got useful information from it concerning what my students could and could not do. What I am against is increasing the time that we spend on testing. And also, I guess I am more concerned than you, Ms. Ditkoff, about the computer piece of it. But the computer piece of it that concerns me is how the use of the computer affects the validity of the test in math or in reading. So I think you can test for computer use, but I think until you know that a child is able to use that computer well, I don't think you can really test their reading comprehension scores. So that is a concern to me. I have been in favor of going ahead with Park, because as a teacher, I feel that the more information you have about implementation, the less stress you will put on your students, because you as a teacher will be able to deal with some of the unexpected things that arise. But I actually have another question here, and this comes more out of the national scene than anything else. And this just is pure ignorance on my part. I'll mention it right up front. I wonder which came first, the chicken or the egg? And by that I mean, I understand that Park is a consortium of states. I understand the role of the government in this. But who is making the money out of this? The states are paying for it. But somebody is developing those tests. And if this is a consortium of states who want to have a test developed, did they consider anything other than Park? In other words, the relationship of the people making the tests to the people who are in the states looking for the tests is something that I'm not clear on, and I wonder if anyone on the committee is clear on that.
I can try a piece of it. So these two consortia were created by those states to create, and they were created with, I believe it was Race to the Top money. There was federal money in it initially, and to create assessments based on the Common Core. And that money's ended. So I don't completely understand it. So the consortia now has to have another way to support itself. Now, in both cases, they essentially went looking for a developer.
Right, that's really
and,
what.
And Park,
Right.
and somebody said at the last hearing, yes, there is a lawsuit involving the selection process of the developer for Park. Surprisingly, right, Pearson was chosen. And I think is it ETS for Smarter Balance? Is that who it is? Do you know? The developer? I believe it is. So Smarter Balance went a different direction with a different developer for questions in banks, et cetera.
I guess part of my question is, why didn't they ask these developers to come up with tests and then say to the consortium, these?
Well, we've talked a little bit about that. So there's Park and Smarter Balance. Now, if you pay attention to some of this really interesting stuff nationally, some states are making a big deal out of dropping out of Common Core and Park or Smarter Balance. And then the next day, turning around and adopting a set of standards that look just like the Common Core, but not calling it the Common Core, because what they're fighting in Indiana, for example, is this nationalization of education. So, we're adopting a set of standards, and they may as well be. As with a colleague from North Carolina, it's exactly what happened in North Carolina. They dropped the Common Core and adopted a set of standards that look just like the Common Core. In those states, they're dropping out of, in one case, Indiana Park, I believe, and in the case of North Carolina, Smarter Balance, and they're looking for other next generation assessments, right? So when the statement's made here that that may be the choice. If it's not Park in Massachusetts, it's based on what people are seeing happen in these other states. I can't remember. I should remember, and I don't. Who Indiana is now working with, but it's a next generation online assessment that they're moving toward. It just happens not to be Park, because nationally and there's in some states it's very hot in the kitchen.
Yeah. Well, by waiting, we of course allow this to play out a bit more, so we can see what's going to happen in Massachusetts before we. And nationally, before we make a choice whether to participate or not.
Right. As I said, I mean, that's our recommendation, is that we delay. And as I said, it comes with benefits. I've tried to lay out a couple of them, and I believe it comes with potential cost as well.
Other comments? Okay. So the question is whether or not we vote to support the old recommendation. And if someone is interested in moving that, you should let me know. Otherwise, I will assume we are not taking that vote. Okay. Docket item 7. Presentation and discussion on current issues, an update on the Brookline High School programmatic study. The long-awaited, much-anticipated, very exciting, no pressure or expectation of excellence
I told you they were easy, Phil.
presentation.
Didn't I? I told you they were. So the last time I was in a room in front of a governmental body with Phil Pinelli, I think we were in Beverly City Hall, right? and that didn't end well. So this will go much better. I've had the opportunity to work with Phil Pinelli a number of times on a number of different projects, and as I said, I worked with him a little bit on what became the new Beverly High School, and we are really thrilled and very lucky to have Phil and his group involved in this discussion here in Brookline. As he's going to walk you through, we've been having some really interesting, very thought-provoking conversations about the educational program at Brookline High School and how that drives or can drive or should drive decisions around where we end up as we move towards serving 2,600 or more, depending on where the numbers end up, students. So, and we're fortunate to have Phil here tonight to tell us about the process so far and what we can expect to see down the road. Thanks, Phil. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Should we wait a few minutes for the group to recollect?
They're here.
Yeah, yes, we're good.
Sorry, I needed a cookie after that.
That's fine.
This is forward.
Great. That's fine.
How about if I do that? There we go. Good evening. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm Phil Poinelli. I'm an architect and educational planner at the firm of Sims, Maney & McKee in Cambridge. I'm principal in charge as well on this project. We have working with us David Stephen, who's also an architect, educational planner. He also is an educator, and his firm is New Vista Design. And we'll be working through the plan together. Just very briefly about Sims, Maney & McKee. We've been in business just short of 60 years. We're in Cambridge, Providence, and now Chapel Hill. About 50% of our firm deals with institutional work, mostly public K-12 and higher ed. So we've been doing, for the last 20 years, doing a great deal of educational planning and school design and master planning. Here are a few of the, or some of the master plans that we've been doing over the years, but what I really wanted to do is these are all studies or master plans that have been done in the last 2 years. And the only reason I bring this up is that that every master plan is different, and for different reasons. Lexington is just starting, significant population increase, not as significant as yours, with a mixed infrastructure. I refer to infrastructure as the quality of the school buildings themselves. Wellesley High School, we've put in place their new high school, now working on a very mixed infrastructure of elementary schools. Waltham has a significant increasing population for very different reasons, and they have all new K-8 schools, a declining high school, but overpopulation due to in-migration and with a very strong emphasis on ELL and SPED. Hamilton Wenham, a community that has a very good economic base, but losing population because people aren't moving back into the community until they've had their kids. It's such a strong economic community. So I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just wanted to point out that every master plan, every study is unique unto the community because of the issues swirling around that community. So in your case at the high school, we're looking at an enrollment of somewhere between, enrollment growth of somewhere between 800 and 900 students. We're talking about in the range of 50% increase in population, which is significant. And I'll just jump to the last one, the significance of 50% more students on the school culture itself. That alone is something that is something that really has to be thought about. But this is also the opportunity to look at teaching and learning pedagogy, educational delivery models, to look at the program, the curriculum, the program, and how things are being implemented, the administrative structure of the school, and so on. And so these are all issues that we as a group are going to be dealing with. The process starts with community engagement. On Tuesday, we're going to be conducting our first of 2 visioning sessions that is bringing in roughly 50 people from around the community. Some of you may in fact be participating in that. We will be looking at we're currently looking at the buildings as in terms of their academic ability to serve the curriculum, both in terms of size and numbers of rooms. We know science rooms are significantly undersized. A lot of classrooms are undersized. That may or may not be okay, labs and studios. And what is that 50% population increase going to do to the academic and cultural support spaces of the school? The library, and the library has been morphing without an increase in population. The library today and how a library is used today is significantly different than it was even 10 years ago. And so with that population, how is that going to change? Cafeteria, you already have open school, and so how does that affect the physical plant of the building? Security associated with the open school as well is something that we want to be talking about. So, and so this is the opportunity to think about the educational programs and delivery models, and it's something that the school has already been doing through their 2020 initiative, so we're going to sort of push them along and bring that whole process through challenges to them and challenges to you on what the future of Brookline High School really wants to be. And we're going to be developing options, and we'll be reviewing them with the planning committee and with the larger community. There's been some study. This study is being called Further Study of Brookline High because there's already been study of Brookline High, and the previous study has identified that you could put additional square footage here or there to accommodate an additional population. The way we're looking at this is not a study of where do you house 900 more students, but how do you educate 2,500 or 2,600 students? And so we've been meeting with the planning committee. We had a session in late May with the 2020 committee and department heads. We had about, I think, with us, 25 people at that session. Each of the 2020 committee reps had an opportunity to report out on what they've been up to, as well as department heads and what their goals were. We went through a SCOG analysis, strengths, challenges, opportunities, and goals, and all of this will get reported out through the, eventually through our process of making everything public and putting everything on the school website. We will be meeting with the committee during the summer. I say in-house analysis, that's really my work that is just number crunching, looking at the spaces, and developing ideas, and then working up the options for reporting out. We will also have a second visioning session very likely in September. This first visioning session is really going to be about 21st century teaching and learning, some of the things I'm going to be talking about now, and bringing people along. And one of the things that I've been referring to is that we're trying to provide sort of layers of information, getting people to understand ideas, concepts in layers, so that the community can build on that, and as we start to come back with options, people will understand possibly how and why these are making sense. So we know we're moving forward with future thinking. You hear about 21st century skills, communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, and problem solving. These are skills that are not taking over from core curriculum. These are skills that are being overlaid on top of core curriculum. And so how do these start to manifest themselves in the educational modalities of what's going on in the world? I handed out a glossary of terms, excuse me, and for those who don't have it, this either is or is going up on the district website, so this glossary of terms will be available. But virtually everything up here didn't exist 10 years ago. The idea of flipped classroom, I shouldn't say that. Interdisciplinary learning has been going on for a long time, but it really is picking up a great deal of momentum and understanding of how and why it's working so well. So the idea of differentiated learning and blended learning being a mix of computer learning and traditional learning, flipped classrooms, the idea that the lecture is given at home and the classroom time is really spent in discussion. So these are things that we talked with the 2020 committee about, some of the things that we will be talking about as part of our visioning session. So how does this start to manifest itself in the built environment? You know, the traditional school, and I'm not suggesting that Brookline High School is necessarily traditional in many ways. A lot of what's going on, this one works a little better, some of what's going on here is already going on, but the idea that in a traditional mode of a teacher-centric, teacher at the front of the room classroom versus a student-centric classroom, and that student-centric classroom automatically changes you from passive learner to an active learner, and that we don't think of teaching taking place just in classrooms, but in flexible learning environments. How's the entire school used for teaching and learning, and so on. I use this as an example. This is a sort of very traditional wing of a school, generic school anywhere, double-loaded corridor, meaning a traditional corridor, used in a 7-day period about 5%, 4 to 5% of the day, and only used to go from here to there. A lot of square footage unused. In many cases, small classrooms with sled desk chairs facing forward. Here is the idea of how can that transform with larger classrooms, with creating learning zones within the corridors themselves, breakout spaces, being able to pull teacher planning very close to the students themselves. And here's that traditional all face forward classroom, but these are all classrooms with the same furniture in them, set up very differently. We take a closer look, and here's that classroom with 1, 2, 3, 4 teaching walls instead of one teaching wall. The idea that the students can be working peer-to-peer learning around a teaching wall, and the teacher circulating as a coach. That's a sort of one end of the spectrum, and right over there is the more traditional side of the spectrum. What we're looking at is flexibility and use of the entire school. So, are ideas like this possible within Brookline High? We don't know. We're going to be exploring the curriculum. Does the curriculum point you into directions such as this and this and this? That's what we really want to hear from teachers, and see how the building is adaptable and what it takes for space and so on. Again, that whole idea that the entire school is our learning environments, outdoor learning environments. Here is an outdoor outdoor classroom with a slate chalkboard because it's outdoors, but it also is Wi-Fi'd. But the idea that we have very flexible classrooms, multiple types of spaces for individual, small group, and large group instruction. So that's really what we're all about, what we're going to be trying to achieve over the summer into the fall, and the intent is to be able to conclude the study by the end of the calendar year.
Well, let me just say a word about Tuesday. As Phil said, they've worked with the department heads at the high school around the 2020 work, and on Tuesday there'll be the group involves a number of faculty members from the committee. Ms. Ditkoff is going to be part of that. Dr. Jackson is going to be part of that. We also have representatives of advisory, planning, the building commission, the selectmen, trying to, there are, of course, a larger number of people from within the building, but really participating in these 2 visioning sessions that Phil's talked about in an effort to really be part of this process of looking at these different possibilities. And we're very excited about being able to bring in a number of people from those different groups into this discussion. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. So I probably have 30 questions, all of which I won't ask, but I will ask other committee members if they have questions first.
Is there a reason you're looking at it?
I couldn't think of one, Mr. Lepsky.
Well, many of the items that you've talked about, I know exist at Brookline High School. The alternative school is already there, and some of those other things. Are there, I'm not even sure what the question is at this point, but are you looking at other things like block schedules or other ways to accommodate the numbers of students and ways of thinking about teaching that makes a large school seem small.
Yeah.
Phil, can I just say, so let me just make a comment on the first thing that you said, and that is that there are a number of those concepts that exist. I'm not sure that I would label them more traditional views of some of those concepts. Some of those programs, some of those kinds of programs that are evolving in other places and that are indeed part of the 2020 conversations look different in the way they integrate those programs with the rest of the school or not, right? So there's a lot of that conversation going on in 2020 that I think will get fleshed out as part of these discussions about how they then fit into the building, what the spaces look like for those programs. Because you're right, in some cases we may say, now this program's wonderful, it's terrific, it's exactly the way we would want it. And by the way, the building isn't built in a way to facilitate that program, right? We've essentially shoved a round peg into a square, or a square peg into a round hole, right? That's what we've done with some of those programs. And how can we address that in the work that they're putting forward?
And I think the other piece of that, the SWS is a school within a school, which is a way of breaking down the social unit and the academic unit. But some of the ideas that work within SWS, how do those get pushed into the general population? I think a lot of what we're talking about, we're experiencing in other schools, is being pushed all through the population. So the idea of differentiated learning, those kids who may be struggling and not for reasons that they may not know, or the teacher may not know because it's not been discovered, being able to find modalities in which we can connect with them, to be able to get to kids at risk and find ways that they're less at risk by this kind of activity. I was recently at a program at Grafton High School, which we happened to design. It was a ed camp this summer, and I attended a session by a physics teacher and on flipped classrooms, and there was about 30 teachers in the room, and I asked him how often he flips a classroom and for which courses does he flip, and he said 100% of 100%. His interest was getting kids working hands-on in physics and getting the lecture done at home, but by going through repetition, by going through experimentation. And so that was his way of connecting with kids at all levels, and has found that extremely successful. So, I'm not suggesting that necessarily, but how do you create environments that facilitate that kind of activity? That's really what we're talking about. As I said, you can arrange the classroom all facing forward if you want to. That's fine. But
those classrooms did you find in Brookline?
but the idea that but the idea that you have the complete flexibility to do a lot of different things, and there's room for improvement. Just in walking through,
I agree
a couple
100%.
of times, and so that's what we're looking at.
Other questions? I'll start a couple, and then we'll see where we go. I won't take up too much time. I mean, one is I really like some of the starting assumptions that you're starting with, in terms of not assuming it's going to end up as one high school versus two, versus other multiple structures within high schools to make it feel smaller. I think we're at least open. We've been asking for a variety of answers there, and I don't think in fact, I know that we don't have any decisions that have been made about that. We have one high school now, and there are many opinions about what one versus two high schools or multiple high school structures could look like, but there is no decision at this point that there's only going to be one high school going forward. So I think we're all very much looking forward to your thoughts on that. I think we're also open to learning what best practices are. So I do hope at some point in this process there's a learning process for, just to at least bring the school committee up to speed on what one thinks of as best practices in high school models now that will take us to the next decade plus, right? Certainly one can't predict infinitely into the future, but there are many, many things going on. I'm not sure I would agree with the things that you put under new educational modalities, since at least half of those are not new. But there are many new ones that you mentioned, things like, and some that you didn't, in terms of adaptive technologies for special education and what kind of environment, physical environment you would need in addition to technological environments. Things like vocational, VocTech, vocational education, and how does one think about different pathways past high school? Things like competency-based curriculum, which is a very different way to think about a pathway towards post-secondary credentialing. So I think there are lots of things that are going on in the environment, in the educational environment, that will be terrific to understand from a learning point of view, whether or not we ultimately choose to pursue any of them. And there may be lots of rich debates about whether or not we should pursue them. I think the knowledge and the understanding of what different models are now it would be incredibly important for the school committee to see. I know there are a number of other school committee members who are interested in that, so maybe in the fall, before any decisions or final things are done.
Yep.
I think the last thing that I would ask, and this is something, and block scheduling, alternative scheduling, I think is also very interesting. Year-round school, especially as one thinks about the hours at which the absorptive capacity of a teenager is peaked, because it normally isn't 8:30 in the morning. So what other timeframes could look like is interesting. So that was a not question. So here's my one question. Let me try it this way, which is, it would be helpful to have us understand what the deliverable will look like what will we get in December? And I'm not sure if you can answer this, or maybe one of our staff, kind of what the pathway after that looks like, because we're all quite keenly focused on the 14-15 calendar and the timing of things, and when we'll receive them, and what we'll have to do with them once we get them.
I think the deliverable will certainly show the process that we will have been through together. The where we arrive is where we arrive together. It's not a recommendation from us, but it's an evolution of the community saying this is where we want to go. And so there will be options. There will be costs associated with those options. There will, and there's always trade-offs associated with that. And so that's really where we're going to be. Whether you're going to select an option between, by December or not, I don't know if that's going to be the case. I think we'll know that more in the fall. We will develop options, but there's an awful lot of process associated with bringing the community along with that as well. And to suggest that we will have gone through this process and you will have brought the community along far enough to say, this is what we're planning on doing, only you can answer that. But the next step would be to submit a statement of interest to MSBA. And all of this analysis will be done in the context of MSBA. And in many cases, we will point out where and how you differ. And those are choices that you have to deal with. For example, you have a quizzitive look on your face. For example, in physical education, you have a lot more PE spaces than the state typically buys into. And what does that mean? In Winchester, where we're doing comprehensive renovation to their school, and in addition to their school, MSBA said, you've got more square footage in your gym than we would approve. We're only going to pay for our percentage times a percentage of that gymnasium. So those are kinds of things that you have to be aware of as we go through a discussion, whether it's, proceeding with Tappan Street the way it is, or renovating it, or adding a second school. It all has to be done in the context of it. But MSBA also has to be flexible from the standpoint of how you run your system. You have close to, I think it was 370 or 380 curriculum offerings at the high school, which is significantly higher on a per student basis than a lot of schools, than most schools that I've dealt with. Curriculum offerings equal or result in larger numbers of classrooms. If you take the same number of students and divide it up into smaller pieces, you have more numbers, higher number of classrooms. So, they're not telling you how to do it, but they have standards within which to work. You have to know when you're within standards and when you're not.
So are we going to have, we're not going to have an educational program for the high school by December, or we will?
What we will have done, what we will have done is we will have taken the curriculum. We have a methodology of taking the curriculum based on a schedule and determining the number of rooms that are needed. And so the question is how much change to the offerings is going to take place.
Right.
That's my question, right?
Right. So I think we have the base documents for an SOI. Our next discussion was about the submission of that statement of interest. Again, I'm going to speak here as if everything else breaks the way we've looked at it, right? Because the present SOI doesn't go through for some reason. We have a different set of problems. But under the assumption that it does, and we submit an SOI on this project, I would think then, because we don't specify in that plan that this is 2 high schools, that this is 1 high school that looks like this. We don't. We have a high school issue. We have to address it. But I think that's when this gives us the base documents for some of that community conversation and some of those decisions about how exactly we'll address that that would come when that SOI is approved. So that's the next step.
And I guess what I'm trying to understand is how much community conversation is going to get built into the fall, and towards what, how clear do we need to be by December? Not so much for the SOI, because I get that,
Right.
that's a different standard. So
right.
I feel comfortable that this will result in something that will get us to an SOI.
Right.
I guess my question is, are we going to be further than that? And the
Well, I
answer
think we're
might
going to be somewhat further than that. We have this visioning group that'll meet twice. There are some other community pieces built into this for the fall, so this won't feel new to anyone after we get I'll call it a report, excuse me. After we get a report in December, it won't feel new because there will be opportunities for the community to engage in that process. And I think, at worst by December, I think there's a real good working knowledge that we have to have some solution, that there are these 2 big buckets of second high school versus doing something here on the table, that there is this discussion about the educational program and how that's leading, right? The discussion about what we do in terms of facilities. I think those things will be really, really clear.
Okay.
Which I think puts us in a pretty good position for further conversation.
Okay.
And part of this is also making sure that tonight's PowerPoint is on the website for
Right.
people to
Right.
view.
Right, we're actually going
That-
to start a section around the high school
that,
over the summer here now.
That the glossary of terms is there. I just today got a draft meeting report from our meeting with the SCOG analysis and
Right.
results of the SCOG, the notations from the SCOG analysis. So these are all things that the intent is to then put them on the website and all be a process of building information
And I think I think we'll do some of what we've done recently. I mean, we've had good success. I've followed the number of hits on putting out a number of communication recently and saying, these are materials that are available in this place, starting a high school section, so that people can engage with this material.
Okay. So one thing that we're gonna have to then sort out is, what does engage mean, right? So download is one thing, people are gonna wanna
Yep.
voice, so
Yep.
I'm just trying to think through the fall and everything else that's happening, so it sounds like we're gonna need to build in time for that.
I think we will, if not during the fall, and again, there'll be these community opportunities, then certainly once we get this report
Okay.
and begin thinking about what are the next steps of that process look like, absolutely.
Okay, that's helpful.
Okay?
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Hopkins.
I don't want to hog if somebody else wants to ask a question first. I actually have two questions. One with regard to your statement about 350 course offerings at the high school. What I'm not clear about, how, we have a set number of students, and they have to take 950 hours. And within that, we offer the classes. So why would, if a high school offers 100 versus 350, how does that change the actual, and as long as our classes are filled, how does that change the actual
And
need?
and they're not always necessarily filled. And I do know that the high school tries to fill them to the extent that they can. But they're not always filled. But Hamilton Wenham, which has roughly half the number of students you have, has 109 course offerings. As big, so you have
Well, when you're
you have
smaller,
over
it's
three
harder
times,
to
you
have-
have twice the population, but over 3 times the course offering.
Well,
Uh-huh.
and this is a good problem, right, from the perspective of educators. as we
Right.
always-
Right.
The good problem here is that even within, so in a couple of ways, just as examples, in what we accept for requirements within the XYZ department, we have choices.
Right,
Many places don't.
right. And
You
that's what we
take ninth
value.
grade, but this is the answer to your question,
Uh-huh.
right? This is part of the answer to your question. So XYZ school district has one way to satisfy the ninth grade English requirement.
Right.
We don't. I'm just making that up as an example,
Right,
right?
right.
And the other way is, and you've commented on this actually at Curriculum Subcommittee, we've signed off on a wide array of electives, right? And even more over the last number of years, which is a great thing. Not all of those courses run,
Right.
okay? But there is this wide array of offerings. And quite frankly, we have, even though we have a standard for what has a course run, those numbers are smaller than they are in some districts. So there's 3 ways alone that's sort of an answer to your question of how that happens. All good things, all things that we want to do in a high school education here, but they have many costs. This is one of them. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, it absolutely makes sense, and part of it is up to us to make sure that classes don't run unless they have a certain amount.
Right.
Well, can I just add, and part of it is also, and we've had many of these conversations over the last year, right, with various committees who are looking at our work. The other way is to continue to emphasize that this is an important priority for the school department, for the school committee, which is to be able to provide that array of courses. So yes, you've said that at X number, it's more important for us to be able to run that wider variety of courses than it is to make sure that every class has 22, right? Because if you went in that direction, you might do what a few of my neighbors in Beverly did and say the only way to satisfy these electives is this very short list as opposed to this list. We've made a different choice here, one I applaud, right? But we have to continue
Those
to.
are the questions that we'll need to answer.
Right.
But-
And also, there are some courses that automatically have smaller class sizes.
Right.
Those that work with power tools, for example, the wood shop, and those types of spaces, have capacities of 15.
Yes.
Dance is another great example here.
But again, Hamilton Wenham has one, what I would call technology space. of all of their, they close down the wood shop, they close down the metal shop, they close down the drafting shop, and they have one technology space that you can take one of 2 or 3 classes
So
in.
this is the
And
advantage of having more students, right?
It absolutely is. It
Absolutely.
We
absolutely
can offer
is.
much more. My second question,
Can I just say one thing on this
Sure.
question very quickly? This is very quick. There are also classes where you have one class, but you have more than one level in that class.
Yes.
For example, photography or jewelry making, you could be at a different level.
Chinese.
So it looks like you have more offerings, but in fact, several of them can be run as one class.
Well, but we run them that way. That's, what you said is absolutely accurate. And we run them that way because we know there are smaller numbers.
Absolutely.
If we had tomorrow, if we were running a foreign language level 4 and 5 together, but for some reason the numbers bubbled up, that we wouldn't do that.
Do it.
That's how we run them.
And we haven't started that process yet, but we will, as soon as we get into that, we will quickly discover that.
And you know that we also run some things every other year for
Right,
the same reason. So it looks like a large number, but we don't run that course every year.
Sure. No,
But those are great strategies for making sure we offer a wider array of courses.
And connecting with, in meaningful ways with a wider range of students.
Right.
Absolutely.
Those kids who are at risk are being given opportunities here where those same kids in other school districts just don't have those opportunities.
Right. Just a second, if you'll indulge me. So one of the things that I hear you saying is there are schools out there, and I know that the high school has gone on some field trips, so to speak, to different high schools to see some of these innovative programs, to see ways that other high schools are run. And I'm wondering if the school committee might be able to, if you picked 1 or 2 of them that you really thought were sort of exceptional, that we might be able to go and visit.
Yeah, I'd want to narrow in a little bit more on what we were looking to see. I mean, because
Okay.
we've had particular purposes in mind. I mean, when we're looking, I'm thinking of a conversation I had with Amy Martin when we were just at the MCN Governing Board meeting about, because the president had spoken at Worcester Tech, and during the vocational program review process, they visited that school for a particular reason around record. So I'd want to hone in a little bit more on what we were looking for.
I think that would
and
be
Of course,
great.
we could do that.
And
But
that's,
I think it would help us to really feel what it is you're talking about.
and in some cases, they may need to be virtual field trips,
Right,
because
right.
I've been to some very innovative schools, last year, a very innovative school in Indianapolis.
That's not that far.
And and it's actually Columbus, Indiana, not Indianapolis. It was a conference from Indianapolis, and a STEM school just outside of Denver. Fabulous programs, but maybe we can create virtual
That's a great idea.
virtual tours of some of these projects.
That would be terrific. Thank you.
Good. All right. Yeah, sure. Mr. Pollack?
I'm very excited about this visioning process, and I encourage you to really care for the early stages of it and the input that you get from particularly from the teaching and learning community about where we might go with the 21st century practices and models for education in sort of parts and pieces, whether it's a school within a school kind of a piece or VocTech kinds of pieces that that have strength in terms of community support and the meaningfulness of moving in a new direction, because I believe that that these visions are very fragile, and that with all of the exigencies of the stampede of students that's coming, and the lack of options for other sites, and traffic and parking, and there's 1,000 considerations that will short-circuit the dialogue and get us quickly from some of this more visioning, holding on to the vision as we start to look at implementation solutions, where that'll get evaporated because we just need to make sure there's enough classrooms, there's enough boxes. We need a solution. And I think that these opportunities don't come along very often. So,
And our visioning session next week is really focusing on education. We're not going right away to what possibilities there might be. That's really going to take place in the fall. So, there's an awful lot of, here I'm preaching to the choir about different types of teaching and learning. The idea that, the way we went to school isn't the way school exists today. But there's an awful lot of people in the community who may not be on board and understanding of these ideas. And so part of this is to bring a lot of people further along.
Can I it's such a good point. And what I've found so far is we in that sort of that advisory group can slip into this, right? The conversation about X and Y and Z, but we have 2,500 students coming by this point. And what I've really appreciated to this point is that Phil and his team have really pulled us out of that, have pulled us back to talking about, what could be, back to the visioning work that's been going on at the high school during the last couple of years, and really tried to get us away from the number of students and into what we're trying to actually accomplish here. But it's such a good point, and I really appreciate you bringing it up.
Amen. All right.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you very much.
Nice to have you here. Thank you.
Until some of our questions, we were actually on track to end on time for the first time in my very short tenure as chairman of the school committee. And of course, we've blown through that largely due to my own. Actually, we are going to pick it up right now because our need for an executive session has changed. Yes? Dr. Allen? Okay, so we are going to move to go into thank you. We're going to move to go into executive here's what's going to happen next. We're going to move to go into executive session to discuss, and this isn't the motion, but to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. And then we are going to come back into open session and potentially vote on to approve an extension to the paraprofessional collective bargaining agreement, and then we will adjourn. Okay? So in order to go into executive session for the purpose, I'm going to move to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy with respect to collective bargaining, because an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the school committee's bargaining position. Ms. Coyne, will you poll the committee?
Yes.
Yes. All right, thank you, and we will come back into an executive session, or out of executive session into open session when we are finished, which hopefully will be in some small number of minutes. Off we go. right, we are back in session. Our agenda item is a proposed vote to approve an extension to the paraprofessional collective bargaining agreement. There is a memorandum of agreement between the school committee and the Brookline Educators Union about COTAs, C-O-T-A, which are certified occupational therapy assistants, and adding them into the BEU paraprofessional unit with a few different conditions. So, do we need a roll call vote or just a regular vote? All right, a regular vote. So, if someone is interested in moving this,
So moved.
Mr. Chang, and if someone's interested in seconding? Mr. Glover, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent, it's unanimous. And we are adjourned for our final school committee meeting of the 2013-2014 school year. Thank you all very much.
See you at the workshop.
See you at the workshop, which we may,
Date and time to be announced.
Dayton Town TBA. Okay.
Oh.